Okay, I'll wait.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be James Barrett. And we're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin. And he's got a book out in which he explains how he thinks he has found a silent gospel inside the Shroud of Turin. Now, I myself have not had a chance to read the book. However, I have, seen on the History Channel, I want to say History Channel, or one of the other documentaries about the Shroud of Turin, and I know about the radiation that it's had in the actual cloth itself, which could have indicated it might have been caused by a burst of energy like an ascension perhaps, or a transfiguration or something of this nature. So, the whole thing makes a lot of sense to me, but before I stick my foot in my mouth, I'm gonna let James tell us more about it, since he's more familiar with it than me by far, since all I know is what I saw on TV. So, James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Royce.
James, I want to thank you for coming on the, show with me, accepting my invitation. I went to Amazon and I saw your book and I read the book description and I was like, well, that sounds like something me and my listeners might ought to learn a little something more about. So I emailed you and you were quick to the task.
Well, it's a passion of mine. I was working in human potentiality and heart biofeedback designs in the 90s, and one thing led to another, and my son passed away actually in March of 2000, and I had an epiphany event, and during that epiphany event, there was a linkage between the information I had been working on and in with the Shroud of Turin, the image on the Shroud of Turin. And I had not looked into the Shroud at that time in any depth whatsoever, and I had no opinions of it. And because of the epiphany event and because of the grief and what had happened with the sudden death of my son, I started to look into it more and more, and I had written down in very great detail what I received during that truly epiphany event. I mean, it was like I was almost downloaded with a very clear vision of material. And I wrote that down, and that basically turned out to be the table of contents for the book. And I stayed true to it, even though I wanted to change it many times over the many years of research on the book. But I stayed true because of my son and the memory of my son. But the bottom line, it took 6 years for that clear memory to complete its river, ride down the river to its completion. And the result was that in the end I started to see that there was a clear connection and correlation between the information I had started with, which was about esoteric traditions and more the mystical traditions and sacred geometry coming from that place, working back into the heart, and then from there on the Sacred Heart, the Immaculate Heart, and how that might translate into a biological ascension. And because the Shroud was a representation, supposedly, of that event. So when I started looking into it, it became clearer and clearer that this little information download that I had was holding up against all the evidence that I was collecting. And I started collecting more and more and reading more and more. And over the years became pretty much very well read and have a very large library on the science done on the Shroud and on the history of the Shroud. And coming from a place of human potentiality, I came into the esoteric traditions, and in Buddhism, they have a tradition where an individual of very high status and attainment can transmute their body at the time of death. And that's called the rainbow body attainment or the light body attainment in various traditions, and especially in Tibetan Buddhism. And the information in that area that I was reading a lot about and that got me interested in the heart and heart biofeedback devices was mirrored in the Christian tradition. And I was born and raised a Christian, but I wasn't really a strongly practicing one and hadn't followed any strong, go to church on Sunday type of thing. I'd really gotten off into the more Indian, Buddhist, the Sufi traditions and looked into seeing how they approach spiritualism, especially coming from the mystical side of things. And the Shroud, as it turns out, is, I think, the genuine article. I think after all these years, I have a bias towards it being genuine now, and that a man named Jesus back in the first century, probably around April 1st, 33 A.D., actually ascended. And that process, when it's read in detail, mirrors a lot of the processes that other individuals have had in other traditions. And in detail, you can read these, even modern ones. There's modern accounts of people, say, in Tibet or India or China, that have literally transformed their body in front of people or next to people. And these events are really quite well documented. So how would a person do that? That became really my interest. And if the best way for me to understand it was to take all the evidence on the Shroud, which is extensive. It's very extensive. There's been lots and lots of research done on the Shroud, from pollen samples to tons of different types of mapping techniques and rendering techniques on it. And what I've come to believe is that article has embedded within it, it's the only article, let me put it this way, it's the only article that Jesus himself actually produced for mankind. Every other gospel account is written by someone else of him and of what he said. But this is the actual object that he left.
That's interesting. That's interesting. James, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
That's fine.
But I don't know if you probably thought of this already, but by embedding it into the Shroud of Turin, there could be no way for man to go and misinterpret it or edit it or anything like that later.
There is, as of this moment, there is no grounded rationale in science for how the object was created. We cannot replicate it in any way. Now, I know on the History Channel and the Discovery Channel, there have been shows. I've watched them all, and I have a lot of other tapes of other people. But what the truth of the matter is that when you take all the anomalies, okay, on the Shroud, the blood was deposited first. That we know. And then on top of that, later on, so all the forensic evidence was laid on first. Then the image was laid on. And the image has a photographic styling to it. It's in a negative. So it's not the positive image, it's the negative image. And only in 1898, when Sekinopia actually took a picture of the Shroud and was developing it, did the actual face and the positive actually show up for the first time. So only in recent times. That's why it is my belief that this object was left specifically for these times. And when I think of it, I get goosebumps. I'm not sure why, but I really feel that the object was left to be interpreted. Before this, it was an object of faith, and now it's an object of science. And under science, there is no faith involved. You actually try to tear it apart to find out what makes it tick. And we've had the greatest minds since 1973, 76, 78, doing lots of work, and all the information that came was rehashed and looked at. It's gone through more peer review processes than you can imagine. And what we end up with is we have a piece of cloth that's basically 14 feet and 3.5 feet wide that has an image in negative on it, and the image itself is done in such a specific way that we have no idea on how it would be possible to actually imprint like that. It's not actually in the fibers. The image is actually in the starch on top of the fibers. And there's areas it's pixelated in such a way that it contains the actual 3D information, like a holograph would have, of the body that it enshrouded. And that's just mind-blowing to think of, even if you try to do that last year, much less 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. So
they still haven't really got technology that can mimic that, do they?
They have no technology to even understand a process for mimicking it. What we have right now, last December, the information I received in this epiphany event, let's call it the event, was that it was a form of UV radiation produced at an event horizon of the human energy field. That's what I received. And it was basically very high UV energy. And what this, Lawrence Livermore here on the West Coast is a very high-end research like Los Alamos over in New Mexico. And there's one also in Italy. And this Italian research institute, the guys that work there on the side did this research on the shroud to see if UV lasers could produce a similar effect on modern linen. And what they found out was that specific UV range down in the low end with very brief bursts of laser light could in fact produce a similar type of effect. So what we know is that some form of light irradiated, and remember this is a negative, so think of taking a picture on old film, you have to have the light reflect off the image and then back onto a plate. And the plate, let's say, would be the shroud. But this shroud was wrapped tightly around a physical human body. And so there's so many anomalies with it and characteristics that make it so unusual that trying to figure out a methodology for it is very, very challenging.
Yeah, I would bet it is, especially if you wanted to mimic it exactly and not just a similar effect. One of the things I wanted to ask you now, because this is something that's controversial in the church, as I'm sure you're just as familiar as me, is that people always say, well, you're going to resurrect into a physical body. You're going to resurrect into an astral body or, an ethereal body, whatever they want to call it, the terminology they prefer best. In your gospel, can you tell if this is a resurrection into a physical or a non-physical body?
What I believe from all the, say, 12 years of effort that I've put into this is that, and this is based also on other, not just Christian religion, but on other belief systems, is that you have a soul and you have your thinking, rational, cognitive mind. And those two aspects of yourself interface through your physical heart and the energy field that's created by that space. And when those three, let's say, aspects or facets of yourself, your intelligence, your awareness, unify, then that aspect no longer can be held in physical form. And so it causes a phase transition, just like, water turning into vapor, that kind of thing. And it reverts back to the organic materials that it literally was born out of from a quantum or perspective or any of those type of physics understandings. So for me, personally, a physical body, your consciousness doesn't go away, the consciousness that is you. It's just how unified it is with, let's call it the divine. But the divine could be the absolute. It could be whatever you like to imagine it or think of it. But that field or that state of consciousness that is the divine, God, let's say, when you're in resonance with it, you have a certain level of compassion, your energy field literally morphs into a space. And this morphing doesn't happen immediately. It happens over time for most people. And your DNA can change, your genetics can change. All that stuff actually occurs, and we have now understanding on how that occurs. But literally, for the few individuals that have actually dissolved into a flash of light, those individuals, I cannot tell you where they go or what happens to them. It's pretty amazing just to think of it. But I will say this, that I believe that the process of incorruptibility, which a lot of the Christian saints, especially a lot of the women Christian saints, have exhibited, and that's a process where the body doesn't corrupt or decay after death. And there are many cases of that. And that process is very similar in its process to the ascension process or the light body attainment process, depending on the terminologies you'd like to use.
Right.
What I will say is one thing is this, is that the man that lived 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, this person, I think, was one of the first to do it like that, and was that dissolved completely, and that was around. I think he actually ascended, stayed around for his disciples in some form for at least 40 or 50 days after, and there are other individuals like that that have done that for their disciples in Indian and Hindu and Buddhist histories, but then this individual left, and where he left and where he went, and the place he actually resides right now, I have, in the consciousness he resides in, I don't really know or understand. I'm just trying to understand the physical, biological process of ascension, and in doing so, have come to certain realizations about the psychophysiological effects that it requires.
Okay. Now, pardon me. I get a little frog in my throat. I was going to say, I forgot to mention this earlier, but James's website is www.silentgospel.com. You can learn more about him, his books, his articles, and everything that he's got over there. Also, there's a link to his book at Amazon right underneath his show description. And for those of you that's listening at other locations, the call-in number is 832-632-7904. And also, if y'all like to join us in chat, ask questions in chat, what have you, get the newsletter, come to www.paranormalpalace.com. I almost forgot to throw that out there for everybody, James. I apologize.
Yeah, I appreciate it. James A. Barrett, JamesABarrett.com is the easiest portal to find most of my material. And I have not updated the website that often. I'm more interested in researching, reading, writing, and talking to folks like you than spending time on the website updating it. But that's JamesABarrett.com is the main portal for, you can even get to the Silent Gospel through there.
Okay. Now, we just had a question from Leslie in the chat room, and he wants to know, is James saying that the energy that put the image on the shroud is the same or similar to pranayama, I mean?
Pranayama is an energy that you produce within inside yourself, that you bring up within inside yourself. That's an energy of like, say, using your chi or life force or however you'd like to interpret it. But no, the energy that imprinted the shroud, if you can think of, like, there's a process, the clearest process, if anybody would like to see it, is there's something that they learned a few years back called sonoluminescence. And sonoluminescence is they take a bubble of, like, gas and oxygen or something like that, and they put it in a liquid like water, and then they use sound waves and they pulse it at that bubble. And the bubble, what happens to the bubble will all of a sudden start vibrating, it'll expand, and then all of a sudden it will implode. And the energy spectrum that's inside that oxygen bubble will be 10,000 to a million degrees, like hotter than the sun. But the implosion of it is so complete that none of the heat from that bubble is transferred to the liquid that it's sitting within. And that's hard to comprehend, but that's the mystery of sonoluminescence. And there's Byron University, I think, there's several other universities, Santa Barbara, that are looking into these processes, and you can look it up online. But, like, it's the same type of process as you see, like, a ladybug, with the chemistry aspect of it when they light up, or some of these fish you see down deep in the ocean that have like a sonal chemistry going on, where they produce like an internal sound wave similar to like your heart beating, and that produces chemistry that lets off light photons that you can actually see. Well, if you look at sonoluminescence, what you have is a bubble that expands slightly and then collapses into nothingness and dissolves out of this plane of existence. It phase transitions from being a bubble of gas in a container of water to nothing. And when it does that, it implodes so completely that none of the energy is released into the surrounding area. But understanding that process is challenging, and one of the best ways of understanding it is the same idea as thinking of as a black hole. And when this thing goes from one state to another state, and it exits this phase of existence, at the event horizon of that sonoluminescence event, you'll see light come off, and that light gives off a spectrum. There's photons. And the same type of thing happens with, I believe, with the ascension process. Not in all cases. Like I said, I believe right now that from incorruptibility of the physical body, there's ranges or stations of attainment all the way up to the place where an individual at the time of death chooses to leave in what is called a rainbow body. That is what it's termed in Tibetan Buddhism. It has a similar name in other countries and cultures, but it's a form of taking your light body and dissolving your physical body. And sometimes pieces of nails or septum, your nasal septum, hair, things like that might be left on the ground afterwards. There's those are relics that are well considered. But the bottom line is that these individuals, and this is the take home here, is that it requires a level of loving and compassion to even begin the process of awakening to reality. And the cool thing is that these individuals in the shroud, what's happening is they are literally tweaking our physics. So these objects, like the Great Pyramid did, sort of, just by trying to comprehend how it was made, it is literally morphing our notion of our physical reality, and it's changing the laws and the rules, because the basic laws and rules don't apply to how the shroud was created. We can't put it in a box and say, okay, this is how it happened. How do you take a human physical body and all of a sudden, poof, a flash of light and it's gone, you know? That's hard for most people to comprehend. But I believe right now very strongly that the process is a skill set that's teachable and learnable, and most people can, if not learn it, can begin the process by just doing acts of kindness.
Okay, so acts of kindness would be one thing. I'm sure there's others, like what, maybe meditation, soul searching, or other things like that, maybe?
Well, meditation, I think, and contemplation. Contemplation and meditation are two separate things, and they both together are the practices that you can think of it as prayer and other terms, but you basically place your attention on something that you're looking to attain, or a gain that you're looking to achieve, and then you put all your awareness on it. But the reason for meditation, or all practices, in my view, are to condition the body to recognize the aspect of yourself that I believe is guiding the whole template, which is your soul, your Atma, the non-local component of your identity, literally. And we have done studies with the heart devices and other tools now that have demonstrated that. I will share with your listeners today that this is the way we actually see an event, you becoming aware of an event. When you're hooked up, and we hook you up to a device, several devices actually, and we have some kind of computer, and it's going to show you images and sound on a screen, and that computer's in a Faraday cage, so you can't affect it by local electricity, and we're showing it to you. What we know now is that literally your heart becomes aware of an event that's going to happen in time, at least 6 seconds. Okay, that's the minimum, prior to the event actually happening in time. And that 6 seconds, what happens is your body sends out signals to the brain 1.5 seconds later, and then the brain and heart communicate back and forth. Then they both send out information to the entire physical body. And the physical body then produces little proteins, neuropeptides and polypeptides that are emotion-bearing chemicals and other chemicals that are going to specifically prepare you for the event that's about to happen in time that hasn't happened yet. And what we also know is your cognitive awareness it becomes aware of that event literally a second or so milliseconds after the event has actually happened. So there's an aspect of you that's operating in non-local space that allows you to prepare for an event physically. And the example I give in lectures is, Ross, you and I are walking down a trail hiking out in the brush there, and all of a sudden we come upon a big-ass rattlesnake, right? And you were trained to love rattlesnakes. You were trained to love all kinds of reptiles, and you're not afraid of them. And you immediately go, oh, look at that, and you go forward towards it. Me, I have a phobia of snakes and all things that slither, and I jump up 3 feet in the air, turn in midair, and I'm running the opposite direction before my feet even hit the ground. The preparation for that, seeing the snake, is taking place in your body before you and I actually see the snake.
But how far before you see it now?
At least 6 seconds in time prior to us actually...
So it's not an amount that most people would notice unless they were, looking for it?
No, like I say, we're just walking. We're not thinking about it or anything. We're just walking along a trail, and we come upon a rattlesnake. A 3.5-foot rattlesnake sitting in the middle of the trail,
right,
sunning itself. You've been prepared. Your perception of that event is such that you prepare for it, where you find empathy and, oh, look, there's a snake, and you lean forward towards it, and you're interested in it, and there's no fear in you at all of the snake. And me, I have a deep-seated fear of the snake, and I'm running the other direction. Well, when we actually see the snake, all of those chemicals for that event, the adrenals, everything that's going to be required for that event, has already been set in process. And it's specific to you and specific to me. That's hard to understand, but that's the way we now know it to happen. And we can sequence that in actual milliseconds.
So does that come out to be the same as if, for example, the chemicals you're going to send out with fear are actually sent out before you become afraid, as if some part of you knows you're about to become afraid before you actually become afraid?
That's what I'm saying, exactly. The chemicals are being produced before you're even aware, cognitively, that you need to be afraid.
So then there's a part of you that's actually going ahead of you, you might say, kind of like maybe an astral body or something.
Now you see, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. And that other piece of you, let's call it the soul, just for the spiritual point of view, or you can call it the witnessing aspect of yourself. There's many different ways or let's call it your higher self. But that aspect of yourself is operating not in time-space. It's not operating in the same realm of physics that you and I are normally becoming aware in, you see. But that's an actual component of you. It's taking care of you. It's looking out for you. It's making you, oh, here we go. We got an event coming in. So either time is off a lot, or you have a component of you that operates in another
dimension.
Right. And these components need to unify in some aspect. That's what and when it does unify, it indicates itself by the heart becoming very coherent and harmonic. And we can witness that, we can see that, we can record that. And those moments, if you sustain them, you might say feel peaceful. They might say they feel joyful. They have a sense of inner peace and harmony and connectedness. And what's actually happening in those moments is the energetics, the electrical vibrations of your entire physical body are literally becoming phase aligned. They're becoming like music in a symphony. And when that happens, your body, then your immune system operates better, your other functions, physical functions operate better. And if you continue that path and you keep moving down that path, you have genetic changes, you have neural pathway changes, and you get to a place where you then become less self-oriented and you become more selfless.
Right.
And those selfless places allow for real magic to happen from the esoteric understandings.
Okay.
Taken to its limit, it literally allows you to puff out of existence in a flash of light. And I think one of the first guys to do it on the planet was a man named Jesus Christ. And I think he set a standard and broke the mold and said, yeah, you can do this. And said, hey, okay. It's like the first person to run a mile, under a certain amount of time, broke the mold for certain things. And now we have lots of people doing things. I mean, when I first started this adventure, before I even knew about the shroud, I was looking into human potentiality and how people go down deep. And we have people that are going down deeper, free diving deeper than you go with aqualungs. And the reason they can do it is because their bodies created new reflex systems genetically in the body that keep the pressure, the blood. They create like an antifreeze. They do all the stuff that allows them to go down their teeth. They become like yogis, but they're not really yogis. They're just free divers. But they've learned a new skill set because somebody else showed them how to do it and taught them the skill sets on how to achieve it. And then they had the level of mind to quiet it down enough to be able to dive. But then you have people that have personality disorders, and 1 minute they're like one thing, and then the next minute they're a completely different person, and they're
like a bipolar.
Well, bipolar is one thing. This personality disorders. These people, the extreme cases, are quite interesting because you can have a scar manifest on your body or a disease, and then when they switch over to the other personality, that goes away. They don't have it, and their body literally morphs into what they are based on their personality. And then you have people that have had like stage 4 cancers that have been given a placebo, and all of a sudden 3 days later walk out and they have no sign of cancer in the body. And the doctors are amazed that the person doesn't have cancer. What they're amazed at is where did all the trash go when the body cleaned itself up? How did the body not crash and burn and trying to get rid of all the junk, the bad cells that it had to clean up and the tumors?
Right.
And I've witnessed this with my own eyes, and these type of things, when you see them, you kind of then go, how did that happen? And it leads you to, it's like a slippery slope and next to you down the rabbit hole. And, you keep finding things. I've met so many interesting people on this path, and some of the things that I've seen with my eyes have really, truly been amazing. I mean, I've had tools from the Pear Institute that allowed you to operate computers without your hands on it, just using your mind.
Right.
Random generating programs back in the, early 90s. There was so many different things. The guy that helped us do the original heart device came from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Some of the stuff they were doing was hands-free, using your mind to operate computers without, for paraplegics and people that couldn't use their body. I mean, he could sail his boat by using his EEG and a computer. Some of the stuff is truly amazing. This is a long time ago now, and some of the current stuff is even more amazing that's out there.
Okay, now we got some questions building up. You may want me to kind of throw out there for you real quick, like before we get too many. One of them was Leslie. He had a question in there about, let's come back to that. He wants to know if you were referring to the idea of higher bodies like on the other planes of existence, the etheric, the astral, the mental, the causal, etc. The energy comes for these higher aspects of self. Then he asked, why does this involve the concept of quantum energy?
Myself personally, I have researched heavily quantum mechanics, and I firmly believe that in the next few years, novel ideas will start to emerge to replace quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics is very limited. And listen, we've spent almost 100 years here trying to merge quantum mechanics with Einstein's concepts of relativity, and we can't do it. And we come up with all these novel, very complex ideas like string theory and et cetera, and we still can't marry the two concepts. And there's no bridge to make the big and the small work. Yet I know that I'm a macro object, but at the core, I am a quantum object with all these little atoms and molecules operating. So it's very challenging, and I think we're going to morph from that idea. William Tiller, myself, I think is one of the most brilliant people out there right now. I have followed William Tiller for years and years and years, and he's done research, and some of his current research has been phenomenal. And what he's demonstrated, what's missing is consciousness. We don't have a place in our current physics for consciousness. We don't place it into the model or into the mix. There's no area to add consciousness even though from the very beginning of quantum mechanics, the observer, which has to do with consciousness, plays a central role. We know that. But there's nowhere to fit it because it's hard to define and to quantify. And because of that, without adding that, most of our physics is very, very limited. And that's what even all the great masters tell us. And it really comes down to mind. It's controlling your mind and inner self-management of it. And William Tiller, I think, has an idea out there right now that it's been around for the last maybe 5 or 6 years at least, but he has an idea that there's basically two levels of reality, and consciousness helps to interface that in intention. When you have consciousness, which is awareness when it's focused is attention. And that attention, when it actually becomes personalized, is your perception of things. And William Tiller has a model that helps to describe it much better. But in terms of the etheric body and all these different concepts, he's on that similar line. I have not, all I know from my research that I can speak clearly on is that there's 3 aspects to your personal identity that you can recognize easily. One is your egoic self, the idea of your cognitive, rational thinking mind, and that aspect of yourself operates in space, time-space, right? It's like the part that helps you go and put things into a linear motion. And your heart acts in the moment, and your soul is timeless. There's no time. And these 3 components, they literally work together. And I think the way it should work is your soul should be guiding and it chose a body and to have for some form of evolutionary step. And what happens is the egoic self sort of hijacks it somewhere along the lines, and it starts taking over. And the people that have high degrees of inner self-management, they find a way to pull these 3 portions together and allow the heart and its natural organic intelligence to help guide the situation of life. And people that do that, you might say, have great intuition. They do quite well. They make good choices. But that's all I can speak to. I can't really mention the etheric body or any of the other types of concepts that are out there on that.
Okay.
Shoot me another one.
Just what I was fixing to do. Coming back to it here. Now, Jen was wanting to know, wanted me to ask you about the Buddha. She wants to know, did he do the ascension process before Jesus?
No. As far as my understanding, and I've read several accounts, no. The Buddha was basically cremated. That's in his disciples. There's various levels of attainment. And let me put it simply, in my view, and I will get call, and people, if they want to email me, it's james@jamesabarrett.com, and that's my email, and you can email me on this. But from my personal opinion on the whole thing is you have various stages or stations or levels of attainment. And the first level of attainment is just recognition that you have more, there's more to reality and existence than the little I that's talking all the time and worrying about tomorrow and eating in the body and physical. And this other aspect, once you become aware of it, it grows in strength, and that's the witnessing component of yourself. And that witnessing component, as it grows in strength, if you allow it to guide your life, that's basically an awakened person, because then you become awakened or enlightened to the nature of reality, which the reality is that the soul is the part of you that's animating your physical. But that's the base camp. That's the starting place of awakening. And then from that place on, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper to various levels. And different systems have different stages that they recognize, or different stations that they recognize in terms of attainment. But in terms of the highest levels of attainment, you have like the bodhisattvas and the people that are awakened in that nature. And in each level of their attainment, there's, I think, 10 layers of bodhisattva attainment before they become totally able to transcend and liberate totally. When you liberate totally, basically your body doesn't corrupt. You dissolve. Some people shrink down in size. Other people will shrink down in size and disappear completely. Other people will dissolve completely in a flash of light. And there's various stages that can be recognized that. And in those various stages are the various levels of veneration inside the sects or the orders that they were a part of. But from my understanding, the Buddha did not, but the Buddha did live 500 years before Christ.
Yeah.
and the information that the Buddha had was available in Egypt and in Damascus. Archaeologically, we know this. Hindu practice was too. I mean, they were trading heavily from the time of, Alexander the Great, all the way through the times of Jesus. And they were trading goods back and forth. And when they traded goods, they had brought their culture and their belief systems and we believe the Apostle Thomas went to India after, and he followed the same routes that Alexander took and went over to India and brought Christianity there. And so for me, the notion of the non-dual self, I think, begins at least 2,500 years before Christ. And then, 1,500 years, you have the Hindu traditions and the various Upanishads and that Rig Vedas and things like that start to come into play. And then you eventually, out of that system, you birth the Buddha. And the Buddha births in the Tibetan Buddhism didn't start until about 700, 800 AD. 800 AD, the Padmasambhava is the great saint that was asked to come over to the regions of Tibet. Another interesting part about the Tibetan story and Buddhism there is when the great guru went to Tibet to bring Buddhism to Tibet, to the Bonpo, that area was an expansionist country, a warlike expansionist country. It controlled all northern India, it controlled all over Pakistan, it controlled all the way up into a good chunks of China. And it's funny that, ironic, I guess, or karmically ironic, that China basically came back and took over all of Tibet. But in those years, Tibet was a very warlike expansionist country.
Okay. Now, I've got another question in here from Jen, and she was also asking, what does borderline personality disorder mean to you?
Borderline?
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, and borderline personality doesn't have a reference for me. I don't have a reference place to put the term borderline. What I was talking about before were multiple personality types, and that's the type that I've looked into in some depth because of the abilities they have physically. Bipolar and these other ones, the chemistry of the human body is amazing.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
My father was a healthy young man there having fun traveling around, and one day he had an operation on his wrist, and the anesthesia got to him and changed some of the chemistry, and they gave him some drugs for antibiotics, and it changed the chemistry, and then he became paranoid and delusional, and that happened within 3 days. And that's just the chemistry that can happen in the physical body. It's very, very simple, and that's why I said it's easy, if you understand all these things, to understand that ascension attainment in that level is very real and possible. And the Shroud of Turin is an actual witness to one such event, one of the first, I believe. And it's quite a truly amazing archaeological object.
Right.
Just that it dated that's long past wars and political intrigue and floods and earthquakes and
everything under the sun.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's interesting about the shroud, it was only recently given to the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church didn't own it. It was a family, a royal family in Italy that owned and had custodial stewardship of the shroud for like literally 600 years almost,
Okay.
And the shroud is related to the Templars, which is interesting. It has a Templar side to the story, because it was literally picked up in 1204 by the Templars. There's so much going on with the shroud. It's a storybook. That's why I called my book The Silent Gospel. There is literally a history and a story there and a physics embedded in this image, and it's wordless. There's not a word on it. Well, there is letters on it. There's a death certificate that was placed on it, probably when the shroud was approved to be removed from the grounds where it was crucified, where the crucifixion happened.
Okay. Yeah, I heard something about Anthony West claims that where he was crucified, supposedly the Ark of the Covenant was underneath there, and his blood dripped down to the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant, but to my knowledge, that hadn't been proven.
Yeah, none of that information am I aware of. I've followed the history of the shroud, the Sudarium over in Spain. I've looked into several concepts. The actual object itself, to me, is mind-blowing enough. It's just think of this. This individual was spiked with 7-inch spikes through his wrists and feet to the cross, and he was flogged with over almost his entire body. He had a crown of thorns stuffed on his head. There's so much blood on the shroud, and the torture that was revealed by the forensics research is much more brutal than what we originally conceived of or thought of. I mean, it really makes the passion look kind of shallow. I mean, it's really it's an amazing object. There's so much on it to discuss and to talk about. There's so many ways you can, spin off of it.
Okay. I was about to ask you myself, and I had something a minute ago and I kind of lost it. One of the things I wanted to know, because we've been in here about an hour already, is Are you planning to have another book on this same subject, say go into more depth or anything like that, or you doing any workshops or anything like that?
I'm doing another book. That's what I've been researching, and really what it's been about is putting together most of the details on the book from the shroud perspective are done. I'm working on the actual biological, physiological process of ascension, how the body is able to transform, especially this level of radical transformation and what it entails. Some of the actual details have been challenging for me to compile because of there's not many scientists out there that wish to talk. They'll talk in generalities about the shroud itself, but to understand the shroud, you have to talk about ascension. As soon as you talk about ascension, all the scientists think that's theology, that's religion, and it's a dangerous subject because the church and other people in Christianity will possibly come after you because of things that you believe or say based on that. So even the church itself will not acknowledge the shroud as a genuine object of the ascension, the resurrection process, I mean. So it's one of those type of areas where it's really been challenging to get collaboration on, to get the final pieces put together. Most of the biology of it is there, but the physics of it is impossible. like I said, the only person I have that I really love and believe in right now, and that might have a model that helps, is William Tiller. And he's like an Einstein of our day. He did work on the heart material with the heart math people. He worked at Stanford University and crystals and other things. He's really quite a brilliant man. He's getting up there in years, but so am I, actually. Yeah. So I'm working on it. I have one here, and the next one I put out there will probably be some form of like ebook that's a $10 download or something like that. It would be something easy for people to put out and print, because the printed version and going through the effort of getting it printed and proofed and everything becomes quite a ordeal.
Right. Well, I can imagine. I've thought about it myself, and I don't want to think about it. But,
yeah.
Thomas Honkblood is in the chat room, wants to know, do you believe in reincarnation?
I absolutely do believe in reincarnation. I don't really have a firm handle on how it's possible. I just know that since you do have a soul, which we helped to demonstrate with our devices back in the 90s, and that soul or witnessing aspect or non-local component of identity, of self, the terminologies are so challenging to give to people, that you have a component of your individuated identity that exists in the timeless state. And this component has awareness. And from what it looks like from the actual physics is that component governs the operations of your physical body right now in real time. So if that's the case, and when the physical body dies, why shouldn't that part then look for another body or another vehicle to incarnate into again to try to achieve what it didn't achieve in this life? So that concept I really do believe in, actually.
Okay. I was going to mention to you that it's interesting that we were talking about this subject, because you mentioned earlier before the show that this is a perfect time for it, what with Easter being, I don't think tomorrow, but next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. But you know what else is really a perfect timing for it? Is my next guest, Tuesday night at 8 p.m. is a man named Kirby Surprise, and he has a book out called Synchronicity, and he goes into how he believes in his book that our soul helps reveal itself to us through synchronistic events, and how it helps us to create our reality as we go, which I think is kind of partially related to what you got in your book, and kind of like an offshoot, in other words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you're right on. The information we brought to the table back in the 90s, a bunch of us, not just myself, but the information we brought to the table was basically that is the case, is that your heart knows one word, and that's yes. And when that yes resonates, okay, or when you're following your gut, this part that's operating. Remember I told you, you're operating we're going down the path, we're going to see the rattlesnake, and we're preparing for it. Well, if you can get in touch with that, what's going on internally before the event, you can create an awareness of that, and that becomes what you perceive as a synchronicity. You see? Because, I was just thinking of you. Well, how were you just thinking of me, that connection is there. It's just becoming aware of it. And the saints, and the enlightened masters, the ones that have truly evolved, they have access to that. So they have a wisdom there that they can know about an individual or an event or something that might seem quite esoteric and interesting, but for them, they're just paying attention. That's all. I mean, they're just paying attention and following what's going on. And so I think you're right on. The synchronicities are information that your heart knows it is the intelligence and the seat of your soul. And that's the access, the portal point. And heart meditations and things like that focus on those areas using breath or intention or visualization help to connect you with that intelligence. And when you get connected with that intelligence, then you will have more and more and more synchronicities occurring, because you'll be more and more in step with what your soul knows. Okay, turn left right here. And all of a sudden you find yourself turning left right here, and you bump into so-and-so and say hi, you see? But that information is made aware to you before in time. And that sounds very bizarre to a lot of people I know, but the facts are the facts, and you just have to kind of go with the flow on it. And so to say, okay, if that's really the reality, then there's a way to listen to it. There's a way to learn about that. There's a way to become more skilled at picking up those cues.
Yeah, which I think it takes time to develop. I was going to say, why don't we go ahead and pull a wrap, since we've been at this here for about an hour. And been trying not to tell you this, but and I've been hearing your voice garble, from place to place, and I don't know if it's coming from your end or my end, because, it's happened with other guests, but it never happens to me. It always happens to my guests. So, one hand wants to say, well, it ain't happening to me. It must be on their end. But on the other hand wants to say, why does it always happen to each one? Because each one can have a problem. So,
right.
I don't know what's going on, but I thought maybe since we do seem to have it, it's not bad, and the shows still come out pretty good, that we might want to go ahead and call a wrap.
Okay. Well, call me back anytime. I'd love to chat more. If anybody wants to email me, feel free.
Oh, actually, I was going to ask you if you'd mind if I called you back, because you're really a great interview, and you're a very interesting man, and I love your subject matter, and I want to thank you for introducing me to Father Tiso. As I mentioned to you earlier before the show started, I've already been in contact with him, and he's doing Lent right now, so I'm waiting until after Lent to actually try to schedule something. But I've seen his video on immortality and, how it's connected with your work. And, I think it'd be a great follow-up to what you got going on, but he probably won't be here until June, because I'm pretty well booked through June.
All right. Well, he's a great interview, and anybody that wants to look him up online and, YouTube him, he's got some wonderful things. The most interesting point there, though, is that he's a Catholic priest that has done the work. He's been in retreat, he's done the work, and he is quite an amazing individual. And if somebody listens to him, then he might have more. He might hold more weight than I do, and I recommend that, because he's a wonderful person.
Okay, yeah, and he sounded like it during the video when I was watching it too, by the way, and I'm looking forward to that as well. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one loose, and if you don't mind, I'm going to save your information so we can stay in touch. I've really enjoyed this here show with you, and I've enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for coming on the air.
Anytime. It's a pleasure.
Okay. You have a good one. Okay. Now, everybody, real quick, before I actually end the show, I want to remind everybody, not only that we got, I put that link in there earlier, and I'll repeat it again. It's www.silentgospel.com. And I'm copying it now to put in the, deal. He's also got a www.jamesbarrett.com. He was telling me earlier in the show. Getting back to what I was going to mention earlier, we got that Kirby surprise coming up this Tuesday night. We'll be talking about synchronicity. I've read his book. It's very fascinating. I think you're going to enjoy listening to him. And in addition to that, next Saturday, my guest is going to be Bill Burns of the UFO Hunters. And he's got 2 new books out he wants to talk about. I think one of them is a UFO guide. The other one is it's either Haunted America or Haunted Worlds, and that's not the exact title, but I don't have that right in front of me right now. But I will have it up on my site, over the next week or so. I also want to mention everybody, there's a Strange Lights Publishing Presents is having a conference June 16th and 17th in Sacramento, California. And the link to it's further down the page underneath all the show promos. It's got pictures on it to some of the guests. Feel free to click on that and visit them and see what you think about the conference, especially if you're in Sacramento already anyway. Want to let everybody know that I will be at the conference via Skype to interview some of the speakers as well as take questions. If y'all have any questions y'all want to forward to me for that event, and it's in June, feel free to forward me the questions, and I'll put them on a document, and I'll ask them when I'm in the conference. And also want to invite everybody to visit my friends at UnitedParanormalInternational.ning. And you know what? I should open up that page and have that ready, which I'm doing right now. And if you look in the menu on the left also while I'm doing this page is loading, you'll see a link that says radio shows. Actually, I'm on the radio shows page. I went to the wrong one. If you click on that, you'll see UKPN Radio, JimHarold.com, and the Gralien Report. And those are shows that I would recommend. But that wasn't exactly the page I was looking for. Here's the one I was looking for. And don't forget to visit, actually that same left menu, the Friends link has links to Alien UFO Community, Supernatural UFO, and United Paranormal International. If y'all want to check them folks out, they're great people. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call a wrap, folks, because I got some spaghetti sauce in the crock pot I want to get to. And thank y'all very much for coming. I couldn't have a show without you guys. So y'all be sure to pass the link around and invite your friends, and we'll see you here Tuesday night with Kirby's Surprise. Thank you very much.